Welcome to this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Julie Moorhouse. She is the founder of Good Maker Tales, and she explores the depth of sustainable and ethical fashion market from a UK perspective. Her site receives up to 38,000 visitors a month. Welcome to the show, Julie.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here.
You're welcome to the show, Julie. You are welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India or even your UK market, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk about. We'll talk about how one's fashion choice can impact their health. In that backdrop, we'll have our discussion. So my first question to you is, Julie, how do you tell people, fashion conscious people, that listen, the clothes you are wearing, the choices that you are making can impact your health? Are people understanding it? What are the ways you make them understand? I saw your website and it looks fantastic, but I want to understand, how do you do what you do?
Thank you. Well, thank you for saying that. It's a difficult topic. It's not something I tell everybody that I meet, because it's not very nice to say, it's nice to meet you, I love your dress, but it's making you ill. So, it's not something that I tell a lot of people. Obviously, people find my website and they read, and they are specifically interested in these topics, and they find those articles. And I do make a point of telling close friends and relatives about these things, but it's not something that I go around telling everybody that I meet. But it's definitely something that's becoming more and more into people's consciousness, that the clothes we wear have chemicals, that a lot of them are toxic, and our governments maybe are not doing as much as they could do to regulate against these toxic chemicals, as much as we think they might be doing.
Right. So, Julie, help us understand why such toxic chemicals, or toxic chemicals which can make your clothes toxic. Why do companies do that? Is it more easy for them to do that? Is it more profitable for them to do that? Or is it because there is no choice even for the makers of such clothes? Because people's demands, people's requirement, people's understanding of fashion is also a bit more out of this world, perhaps. So help us understand, who should we blame? Should we blame the industry? Should we make the choices of people? They want so many choices. Or should we also blame, the people, the models, and all those people who are showing different sort of clothes? I'm no words to ask the right question for this. Help us understand, what is your understanding on this?
Well, firstly, I started off just like everybody else in this space, and I had no idea about sustainable fashion. In fact, I was always very big fan of sustainable buildings, and I didn't think about my choices. I didn't think about all the clothes I was buying. It just didn't enter my head to think about clothes in that way. And so the more I started to learn about it, the more I kind of became awakened, and it suddenly seemed obvious. But it doesn't seem obvious to most people. It definitely didn't seem obvious to me. And the more that I learn about it, the more I learn new things every single day. And the reason that I became interested in the chemicals in our clothes is literally, I was listening to a podcast about forever chemicals, and the fantastic Claire Press, who hosts the podcast, The Wardrobe Crisis. And she had a podcast about forever chemicals and how they can affect your health and how they're found in beauty products. And the more I looked into it, I realized that they're also found in clothes, forever chemicals. And forever chemicals are PFAs, polyfluoryl, I can't even try and pronounce it. So we'll just say PFAs. And anyway, they're used to waterproof our clothes. So I started to realize that a lot of clothes that are waterproof, like waterproof jackets, etc., have these PFAs, these forever chemicals, and they're called forever chemicals because they don't leave our bodies. And I think something like 99% of people have them in their bodies to differing extents, more or less. I have no idea how many I have in my body. The person that was interviewed on this particular podcast had a particularly high amount that she'd been in a study. So I got more and more interested. And then I realized that PFAs aren't the only thing that's out there. There's also flame retardants, which were commonly used in children's clothes for many, many years and still used in mattresses. There's all sorts of other chemicals, phthalates, that are used to plasticize clothes and to make clothes more flexible. Stain-resistant chemicals to make stain-resistant clothes used in chemicals used in dyes. But I think the answer to your question about why a company is using them is that they're so good and there aren't necessarily great alternatives. So I definitely think that the waterproofing one, I've read that a lot of companies are really struggling with that one to try and find an alternative to waterproof their clothes, because these are really good chemicals and they work really well, they do a great job, but they're just not very good for us.
Okay. What ways, different materials used in fashion clothing can impact our health, so that, the audience can understand, okay, these are the things that can lead to this sort of health problems. If you can help us understand, in a simple manner.
Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, I've mentioned PFAs, and PFAs are used for waterproofing. So the type of things that they can do to our health, they can cause fertility issues, they can cause liver damage, asthma, and kidney disease. This is when they build up, particularly they build up in drinking water and food. Then there's phthalates. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that very well, but they're a plasticizer. So as I just mentioned, they're used for kind of printing images onto clothes and plasticizing clothes. They can cause endocrine disruption. A lot of these chemicals cause endocrine disruption, and their phthalates are actually known to be cancerous as well. So it sounds very scary. I'm sure that just by wearing something with a print on the front of your t-shirt, this is not going to happen to you. But it's just for us to be conscious of the effects, of a lot of exposure to these chemicals. And then a particularly nasty one is formaldehyde, and they're used. It's that kind of new clothing smell on garments, and it's used sometimes added to cottons, and it can help prevent wrinkles on garments. So they're a particularly nasty one. They can cause asthma, nausea, wheezing, and changes in lungs function as well. Then there's flame retardants, as I mentioned. They can cause endocrine disruption as well, infertility, cancer. This is with a very high amount of exposure. And then heavy metals are used in things like leather tanning. They're used in dyes, and they can cause reproductive issues as well. So there's a whole host of issues that can come from over exposure to these chemicals. And it also makes you worry a lot about the workers that are making these clothes for us. So it's not just us wearing the clothes, it's the people working and making our clothes for us as well, who often have less of a voice than we do.
Right.
So that's something.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. You wanted to add something more to it?
No, sorry, go on.
No problem. So, Julie, I want to understand for the audience is that, who are the main consumers of such clothing? Because traditionally people have been using clothing more towards cotton, and then later on even linen and other things. But such brands or such companies who are producing, who are the main buyers? Fashion conscious, a lot of young people are buyers, can be your buyers, but a lot of young people are very conscious about the environment, about sustainability, about what they are using, which company's brand they are using. And so I want to understand then, where are these companies who are using such chemicals? Which market are they finding it much more lucrative for them? Are those people not knowing it, or is it like they are looking more for comfort in whatever brands they are wearing? I want to understand, because like wrinkle free, so obviously that can be, or if water falls down and it will not get soaked by your clothing, so it's another way. So I keep on seeing different advertisements on social media and all that, but I want to understand the target audience of such brands, and what is the opinion of such target audience on this on such type of clothing or fashion.
Well, I think the answer is all of us. We're all wearing these clothes without knowing it, including myself.
You tell us, at least I will start leaving those things because I don't want to get impacted by such clothing. I will rather wear the Indian traditional garment making sort of a system, handmade garment. At least that is better than all these chemicals.
Natural materials are really the best, but the problem is, you're right, cotton was traditionally used for years, but even cotton has pesticides, a lot of pesticides and insecticides used in the making of it, unless you opt for organic cotton. But cotton has become a smaller part of the market, and polyester has become, and synthetic materials have become a huge part of the market. And they are cheap to produce, they're made from oil, and they're made with lots and lots of chemicals. And because they're not natural, they quite often have flame retardants attached to them because they are more flammable. Whereas cotton, wool, and those kinds of clothes don't need flame retardants because they're natural chemicals and they're naturally flame retardant, and they're naturally more breathable, and they're so they're better for your skin. But I have waterproof jackets hanging in my wardrobe. I don't have that many. I have a couple of waterproof jackets hanging in my wardrobe because I like the outdoors. I like going outside. I like walking. You wouldn't think of that as your typical person that's buying clothes with chemicals on, but these are people who like the outdoors, who like going camping, going walking, and yet we're exposed just as much as somebody who's really into fast fashion, who's walking down the high street. So it's affecting all of us, but we just don't know about it. And the reason that people are continuing to wear these clothes is because we just don't know about it. And of course, no one's advertising this fact, because why would they? Because these chemicals are generally cheaper. Natural, organic clothing made from organic materials like wool and cotton are more expensive generally. Although there are some fantastic companies starting to produce. There's one I love called Yes Friends. They produce an organic cotton T-shirt. Started off in the UK for $7.99. I think it's now £12. I don't know what that is in Indian currency, but it's very affordable compared to a lot of sustainable fashion brands. So it doesn't always have to be really, really expensive to find these more natural products.
Right. So are companies waking up to this? Because the world is changing, climate change and all those things towards, in workplaces, people are looking for non-toxic workplaces. So why not non-toxic clothes? So how is the world, the makers of such clothes preparing for this whole shift in the times that we live in and people's understanding of things as it starts growing better?
Well, I certainly am seeing more and more clothes with a label which is called Oekotex. There's a fantastic video that says how it is pronounced in loads of different languages. So I pronounce it Oekotex. It's Oekotex. And there are other certifications like Blue Sign as well. And they are certifications. It's a label on your clothes and it says that it's free from toxic chemicals. And they test for a huge amount of different chemicals. And I'm seeing that on more and more clothes, particularly children's clothes, which of course children have even more sensitive skin than adults. And that's, the fact that you're seeing it more and more and more means that companies are waking up to this. And the more that we as customers of clothing or consumers of clothing, it's a word that's not great, consumer, but as we're buying clothes, as long as we start buying clothes with this label or that are made from natural materials, we are sending a signal to the people who are making those clothes and selling them that this is where market demand is, and they'll make more of them. But it's a slow move.
Right. So, Julie, your main market, if I understand, is in the UK.
Yeah.
So help us understand your main audience. Who are these people that come to your website? 38,000 visitors per month. Secondly, in terms of governments, what is the UK government doing in this regard? Is it, because industry talks of greenwashing, sometimes, governments can talk of whitewashing away everything and forget about things in a way that it almost brainwashes your mind, So that was, I want to understand, are governments waking up to this? Is UK government serious about doing something about it? where more and more industry or the people are waking up to it? I want to understand the change that's happening on the ground.
Yeah, well, in terms of my customer who's reading my website, it's about 60% coming from the UK, about another 25% coming from the US. I have a small proportion from Canada, and then the fourth most popular is in India, which is really nice. And I have to say, I've travelled a lot in India, and I love the country. So it's really nice to be here talking with you. So that's my customer, and it's about 60%, probably about 55% women, and a slightly increasing number of men. It was about 40%. It's getting a little bit higher, the number of men who are starting to be interested as well. In terms of governments, probably the most stringent regulations come from the EU. Unfortunately, the UK is no longer in the EU, as we all know. The UK government, there was a report produced for the UK government, I think it was 2019, or it could be I think it was around 2019, called Fixing Fashion. And it was an amazing report that was done, and it had about 21 recommendations as how the government could improve the fashion industry. They didn't take up one of those recommendations. They decided it was down to companies to do it voluntarily. So that's being readdressed now. In fact, I think it was 2019, because I think it's coming up to the 5-year anniversary of that report I was reading recently. With regard to regulations around chemicals, I have to be honest, I'm not an expert, but there are regulations about certain dyes. There's a group of dyes called azo dyes, AZO, and they are very cheap, easy to use, very good, long-lasting dyes that are very, very good for clothes. A lot of them are toxic, so a lot of them have now been banned, but not all of them. And so there are still, as I understand it, there are still dyes out there that are, obviously the most toxic ones have been banned, but there are still dyes out there that are slipping through the nets, basically. And that's why we need people, bodies like Oekotex, like Blue Sign, who are looking at our clothes and saying, we've tested these and we are saying that these are free from toxic chemicals. Because if they're not doing that, then, well, who is? I don't think our government's doing, personally, I don't think they're doing enough. Because big industry is very powerful.
Right. But there are a lot of sustainable brands, fashion brands, who are doing things on their. What are some of the things that these brands have taken in the form of some initiatives? Help us understand so that people know about these initiatives from some of these fashion brands. And also, if it is real initiative, or are they going just for, as they say, the greenwashing word is there. So many people try to just say that, okay, we are doing it, but not actually doing on the ground. So I want to understand your perspective. You are a bit more, more knowledgeable about these things than I would ever be.
Well, I guess it's because I've been researching it a lot for the last few years. I certainly wasn't before, but I would say that there are some amazing sustainable fashion brands out there doing some fantastic things, innovating, coming up with new ways of doing things that nobody else has thought of. But it's not always the most profitable thing to do. If they wanted to be profitable, they could go and be a fast fashion brand and sell on bulk, sell clothes cheap, promote overconsumption, and they're not doing that. So that's why it's called slow fashion. So some of the things that these brands are doing, certainly with regard to chemical use, is there's a lot more use of organic materials. So organic cotton, as I mentioned before, traditional cotton has a very, very heavy pesticide and insecticide use, and a huge amount of water use as well to grow cotton. So organic cotton has a lot less chemicals. Organic wool as well. And silk is used, although silk has question marks over how ethical it is because of the way that silkworms are killed, basically. And even leather has, I'm personally not a huge fan, but, leather is a more natural material. But what I would say about leather is that a lot of people think that it's a byproduct of the meat industry, and it's not always. So there's a lot more demand for leather. In fact, that there's growing demand for leather and not growing demand for meat. So What some of the amazing things that are happening are plant-based leathers. So now you can have apple skin leather, Oekotex, which is a leather made from pineapple leaves. There are leathers made from wine, from the residues of wine making. There's so many different amazing types of biodegradable leathers out there now, because traditionally when you think of vegan leather, you think of PU, polyurethane, horrible, horrible kind of plasticky leather. And you think, well, I'd rather have normal leather because it's biodegradable. So these plant-based leathers are becoming more and more and more used, and therefore as they get more used, they will become more affordable and into the mainstream. There's some of the recycling things. There's a brand in London that I love called Elvis and Cress. They make amazing, beautiful handbags from disused fire hoses in London. They take all of the old fire hoses from London's fire brigade and make them into beautiful handbags. And then they use the old silk from parachutes for the lining. And they take offcuts of leather from Burberry to create kind of leather things on the bags as well. Then there are companies like Plant-Faced Clothing. They are a totally vegan brand, and they go right down to the dyes and make sure that there are no animal products used at all in their products, right down to the dyes, right down to insects being grinded up and used as dyes, which I never knew about before. So, all of these initiatives cost more money than making clothing or products from cheap polyester, from traditional materials. But these brands are innovating and they're doing things differently, and people are starting to really appreciate it. The demand for sustainable fashion is going up. The demand for vegan fashion is going through the roof, which is very, very good to see. And so the bigger brands, to answer your question about what are other brands doing, they are starting to take note, and they're starting, you'll see, better cotton initiatives in some of the main brands, even Primark, H&M, starting to produce lines with these kind of organic materials. But they're lines, they're not all of their products. So let's see when they produce all of their products with these materials, that will be great. And it's not just a conscious line that might just be a marketing ploy.
Absolutely. Be that as it may, as things change, a lot of things will people's demands change, a lot of things will change. Till then, people like you will keep on spreading awareness, and that awareness like this can lead to change. So a lot of people who want to know more about such things, more about from your website, Good Maker Tales, what is the best way for them to reach out, reach to your website, as well as to reach you to connect with you?
Well, the website goodmakertales.com is really the best way to find me. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook, but mainly I am really on the website. It's the main place where I kind of spend most of my time. And I would be delighted for people to come and read it and visit the website.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you very much.